Good evening and many thanks for staying with KTN News. This is our continuing special series, Speaking Climate Action. And tonight we are focusing on policy. And on this matter, we will be looking at what Kenya is doing, particularly to mitigate the impacts of climate change, and also looking at regional as well as global policies that are in place. What are they doing? What are the kind of impacts we've seen them or achievements of these policies so far? We'll be delving into this with my guests, whom I will be introducing in just a bit. But before I get into that, let's set off the context of our discussion with this story.
Humanity has been running after wealth for decades. It is a selfish endeavor that defrauds Mother Nature, whose gifts of natural resources to mankind is constantly abused. The evidence is staggering, real, yet conveniently ignored and sacrificed at the altar of economic development. This form of abuse has denied many a nation peace from within and without, as conflicts and food shortages now take center stage. Unfortunate situations occasioned by compromised food production for both humans and animals, and a fight for the little available food options. A tired Mother Nature is now retaliating.
Over 2 million of my fellow Kenyans are facing climate-related starvation. In this past year, both of our rainy seasons have failed, and scientists say that it may be another 12 months before the waters return again. Meanwhile, our rivers are running dry, our harvests are failing, our storehouses stand empty.
Big talk, backed by little action, may make us believe that we are not yet on the brink of precipice, but we are hurtling there. Amid this confusion and indecision, there is hope. It is encouraging when common people feel the need to take action.
Tulikaa chini tukaangalia tukaona hii msitu ni kama unaisha, na sisi tukiendelea kumaliza na wale wengine watakao toka nyuma yetu pia watakuta nini. Tukakaa chini tukasema lazima tuhakikishe tumerudi pale tulipokuwa, pale mahali ilikuwa mwanzo.
As a nation, we are now digging deeper for sustainable solution.
Currently, close to 90% of the electricity used by Kenyans is from renewable energy sources, and we plan to achieve 100% renewable energy by the year 2030.
Our dependency on plastic is a sickening affront on our lakes and oceans which are rising. As we hurtle towards self-destruction, we have closed our eyes to the obvious. We could be waiting to learn from painful self-inflicted accidents unless we open our eyes.
Right, and we want to jump right into our conversation. You've seen from that story exactly the impacts of climate change. And I'm joined by Geoffrey Omedo, who is a portfolio analyst at UNDP Kenya in charge of environment and climate change, right? So thank you very much, Geoffrey, for joining us this evening. Later on, I will be also joined by Professor Omedo, who is just about to make his way onto the set. But we'll begin with Geoffrey. And you've seen from that clip, and of course we've been having conversations about the impact of climate change on a global scale, and of course we are also talking about it here in the Kenyan context. Let's maybe kick the ball running by understanding exactly what the outcomes of COP26 were in terms of policy, in terms of what the globe needs to do.
So thank you very much. First of all, Sharon, I'm glad to be here. And on behalf of UNDP, it's a pleasure for us to partner with the media in Kenya to really ensure that the Kenyans understand what is happening in this climate change issue. Sometimes we are too technical, we are too scientific, and we forget that climate change is some story that is affecting every single Kenyan. Yeah, so we have a lot of challenges that Kenyans are going through due to climate change. And maybe if I can just give a bit of context of where we're coming from.
Sure.
In the western part of the country, in the rich zone that is the breadbasket of Kenya, we have seen a lot of challenges on the rainfall regimes. It used to be very obvious that the rains would start in March, April, May, and the farmers would know when to plant. But we have witnessed in the last 2 years, in fact, farmers have had to plant 2 or 3 times because the first time they planted, the crop failed.
There was no harvest.
There was no rain, actually, when it started, because the period when the rain started has changed drastically. Now, another challenge is when it comes to harvesting. And many times when it comes to harvesting, it's supposed to be dry, but we have seen a lot of maize rotting in the farms because during harvesting periods, that's when the farmers, the rain is actually falling. So we find that a lot of harvest that is actually coming out of the farms is rotting away and introducing aflatoxin. That's a challenge we are seeing in the agricultural regions in the country.
And it's very real because this is our our mainstay as a country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When we go to the 14 counties that are the northern frontier counties, where we have the arid and semi-arid region, some counties have not seen rain in the last 2 years. Not a single drop of rain has fallen there. And these are communities that rely on pastoralism. So you can imagine, and in fact, His Excellency the President recently declared that a major disaster, a humanitarian emergency that we have there. When you go to the coastal regions, we have counties there that are currently struggling because we are seeing the rise of the sea level rise, leading to intrusion of salty water into freshwater sources. And these challenges are there. Urban towns are having a lot of impacts of climate change. So we are seeing currently the climate crisis that has been forecasted for years. We are living through it in the country. So it's really important for us to contextualize this climate change agenda. It's not a foreign subject. It's a very, very localized problem. And all of us are seeing the impacts. And we need to really see a lot of human action, a lot of policy action, a lot of financing action, a lot of real investment in tangible programs and projects that can be able to help us stop this crisis. Now, over the last 1 week or so, we've had world leaders, including our own president, going to Glasgow in Scotland. What were they going to do? The 26th Conference of Parties on the UNFCCC on climate change was to be the main conference that is going to deal with some of these issues at the global level. Because we realize that while Kenya does not contribute a lot of the emissions, it is actually being impacted. And yet we also have developed countries that emit a lot more. So it's important for them to sit around a table, agree on a sustainable solution to this issue so that we can be able to come up with adequate financing to help countries like Kenya adapt, adequate policies that will be able to help us reduce the human-induced emissions. A lot of the emissions come from cutting down forests, a lot of the transport, a lot of industrial activities that actually lead to climate change. And also, how do you deal with countries like Kenya that are actually completely impacted? So those are some of the key issues that were being discussed in Glasgow. And as Kenya, there's been a conscious effort to mitigate these impacts. We have policies in place, right? Even NEMA coming into place through the Environment Act in 1999 was to just have a sustainable environment management policy. From where you sit, do we have our mouths where the money is? Are we actually on the right path in terms of policy that will lead us to do the right things? Thank you very much, Sharon. I think over the last 10, 15 years, Kenya has done tremendous work when it comes to putting the policies in place on climate change. In the year 2010, UNDP and other partners supported the first climate change response strategy. That was in 2010. We supported the Climate Change Act 2016. We have supported 2 climate change action plans. Now we're in the second action plan period right now. We've also worked with the National Treasury, and we have a climate finance policy. In fact, Kenya is doing so well when it comes to climate finance. Just last week, the World Bank Board met and approved a $150 million loan to Kenya that will go to the counties, the financing locally led action program. And that's why counties right now are trying to put in place the proper infrastructure policies as well, because the national level we have done quite a bit on the policies.
Right.
So when counties like Garissa, just last week we were helping them finalize their climate change action plan, and all the other 47 counties finalize their action plan, then it will be easy to translate what the national government has done at the national level to the county level.
Yes.
For example.
And because the impacts vary from region to region, right?
And they are context specific.
Yes.
For example, Kenya has committed in the constitution to achieve 10% tree cover. But where are these trees going to be planted? At the counties level. So the counties must equally come up with policies that can effectively articulate how the 10% will come down to the ground.
Right.
For example, Garissa will say we have 3% contribution to the 10%. Kakamega will say we have our Kakamega forest, the last remaining equatorial forest in Kenya, and we think we can be able to grow onto it and we get to 7 and 8. So at the in the large-scale view of things, the president will say that, yes, we've realized the 10% tree cover, but all these actions need to be happening at the counties. So, yes, we have very good policies at the national level, but we need all these policies to be cascaded down to all the counties. Number two, we may not have a lot of financing, but government has tried to utilize some of the budgetary resources to deal with the financing issue. Partners like UNDP and the UN agencies and the bilateral partners here then come in there to also see how we can leverage on the international resources that are there to help Kenya mobilize more resources to deal with the climate challenge. So that's another level that we really need to do, and we need to see a lot more discussions on the financing bit, because as much as Kenya does not contribute to a lot of this climate change, we are actually impacted. So in the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, the international community has to come in and support us. We have to support Kenya to effectively adapt, and not just Kenya, but many other countries in the developing countries that are actually impacted. So this is where we think there's a bit of work that needs to be done. We also want to see most of these policies that are very, very brilliantly done. I think Kenya is famed to be one of the best countries in terms of policies. We want to go into action.
And that's actually exactly where I was going, that we have all these policies, and anyone watching from the northeastern part of Kenya, all these places that are vulnerable to perpetual drought, how then do you translate that we have good policies but we still see these impacts? What is the translation from policy to actually seeing this, and what duration? Like, talk to us about what that means. Having policy in place, what do we expect them to see happening as a result of having these good policies? What is the action point?
Sharon, every Kenyan has a role and responsibility to play in this issue. Government sets in place the right regulatory and policy environment. Private sector have a role to ensure that their businesses speak to what these policies want done. The civil society has a very important role in terms of advocating to ensure that these policies are actually being implemented. Government entities at the national and at the local county have an important role so that they harmonize the budgeting processes to ensure we can be able to effectively get this work done. The Kenyans themselves have a responsibility. And once we do the awareness raising and the sensitization to them, for example, it should be very easy for every Kenyan to say and to commit that 10% of all the land I own will be under forests. And so we'll be able to effectively realize some of these high-end policies that we are actually committing to. But what we think is vital and quite critical at this point is the championship of government, but moving with the whole of society to effectively get everybody working. Like the government's commitment to realizing the 2 billion trees covered by the year 2022 should be lauded, and the UN is very, very proud to have partnered with government in this. So UNDP, UNEP, FAO, UNCDF, and MPTF have come together with government, and we've designed a global tree growing fund that is going to be headquartered in New York, that will be able to mobilize the resources to effectively support government, be able to meet that very ambitious goal. So I see a role where everybody has a role to play, and I think we are starting to see some of these results going forward.
Maybe to talk about that, what are some of the successes? Are there any immediate, momentary successes that we are seeing from these policies, both Kenyan and perhaps regionally?
Yes. To be honest, and I think the next respondent will speak more to how they view the successes. Because from the UN perspective, as we analyze the Millennium Development Goals, there was quite substantial progress that was recorded. as we analyze the Sustainable Development Goals that Kenya and many other countries have also committed to, we are seeing quite some good results being reported in terms of access to potable water, for instance, in terms of Kenya's very, very, very transformative realizing 93% of their electricity being green is not a small feat. In fact, there are not many other countries that can be able to boast having 93% of their electricity being green, coming from renewable sources. So there's a lot of progress we are seeing, but we still have challenges. On the energy question, many of the households in Kenya, in the rural and urban areas, still rely on charcoal, especially in the urban centers. In the rural centers, they rely on firewood, which comes from the forest. And these are the drivers that are actually fueling the deforestation that we see.
And is this what we are talking about when we talk about financing? Is this then what will enable us enable the communities that are still using this to change?
Exactly. Exactly. It will.
What would that look like? A society that's completely, let's talk about our communities that, I mean, you're using charcoal because it's the most accessible, maybe financially and all that. So what would it look like where we have 100% moved from that? What is that ideal scenario?
Sharon, let me tell you about charcoal. It's a very interesting value chain. It is illegal in this country to actually produce charcoal. When you're found producing it according to the law, it's illegal. It's illegal to transport charcoal beyond 3 bags. You are supposed only to transport less than 3 bags, which is assumed to be for your own domestic use. It's not, we are not sure whether it's illegal or legal to sell charcoal, but using charcoal, and most of us actually have charcoal in our houses. So it is important for us to find a way where we can sustainably support our community's transition from biomass and move towards sustainable biomass. Because we know that many people still rely on it. But yet we know the benefits of LPG, for example, and the huge potential that LPG has in this country is yet to be tapped. Even within the biomass area, we have the cook stoves. The cook stoves greatly reduce the wastage that's done in terms of cooking, but we don't see many communities actually adopting the cook stoves. So this is what financing models will be able to help Kenya transition into green and low carbon pathways. And this is the kind of support that Kenya requires in terms of mobilizing financing for this.
And I just want us to look at some of the some graphics to just show us the magnitude of what we are dealing with in terms of impacts of climate change and then the areas that need intervention. So we'll start by looking at regional climate challenges, and we've seen perennial drought in this country. We have seen catastrophic flooding the world over. We've seen rising ocean and lakes. These are all manifestations of climate change. And we also want to look at that board that just shows us in a little bit the climate change, the causes of climate change and manifestation, which includes dwindling forest cover, threat posed by plastic, rising population, and erratic weather patterns. These are some of the causes and manifestation of climate change. And some of the climatic issues we are dealing with as a region. In Kenya and Uganda, we've seen these two countries affected by the rise of Lake Victoria. We are also seeing loss of glacier on Mount Kenya and Kilimanjaro, and also threats of the Mau water complex. And just a quick look at some of the environment policy milestones that Kenya has made. In 2002 was the formation of the National Environment Authority, NEMA. And in December of 2016, and you mentioned that, Geoffrey, we also had Kenya ratifying the Paris Agreement. And in August 2017, Kenya banning the use of single-use plastic bags. Of course, a lot of milestones that we have spoken about. And I know we are very short of time, Geoffrey, just to, even as we head towards it, in terms of policy, we have very good policies in the country. What would be the next step, in your view, that we need to make to inch us even closer to managing this?
I already mentioned it, but the countries become very, very important in the next conversation. And we are glad that the Devolution Conference has now been confirmed for mid-November 20th in Makueni. It was postponed because of the COVID challenge. And this conversation will focus a lot on climate change in the counties. So we would like to see the 47 counties coming up with innovative, local, practical solutions that speak to the huge challenge of climate change in energy, in transport, in agriculture. And there are a lot of climate-smart agricultural opportunities that counties can be able to effectively adopt. We have issues of disaster risk reduction and resilience. And we remember whenever there are floods, whenever there are droughts, it's the counties that actually are impacted. And that's why we are quite very happy with the World Bank's and Sweden's and Denmark's support to the financing locally led action program, which is a huge, huge undertaking that will demonstrate a lot of work on the county levels. We are also quite happy, and we are really working with government right now to co-create the tree growing fund that should be able to avail resources to the counties to effectively also deal with the forestry challenge and reduce degradation. We are very happy that Kenyan government has committed to reducing degradation of land by 5.1 million hectares. His Excellency the President actually made this commitment when he was in Glasgow. And this is something that's quite achievable. If you look at that whole area from Narok all the way to Magadi, all that region needs to be seriously rehabilitated. It's a very important ecosystem that currently has not been able to undergo the restoration that we need. You mentioned the issue of the rising lakes. Do you know one of the reasons that the rising lakes has become a major challenge? It's because of climate change, but also the ecosystems have been degraded such that a lot of silt has gone down into the basins of the lakes, reducing the amount of volume that they can be held in these lakes. Some of these challenges that we think can be able to be resolved.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. Of course, a lot that we can discuss on this matter, but a lot of takeout also. Importantly, as you have mentioned and you are working on as UNDP, is cascading this policy from national levels to the county levels, which are the areas that are feeling the impacts directly. So thank you very much. Geoffrey Omedo is a portfolio analyst at UNDP Kenya in charge of environment and climate. Thank you for gracing us on KTN News. And that's where we wind up today's edition of Speaking Climate Action. My name is Sharon Momanyi. I'll see you again next week, same place, same time. Have a good evening.